So also just sort of um a segue into that. Do you make art like who's your audience? Do you make art for your audience or do you make art for yourself?
It's a little bit of both. I think when I first started doing it as an adult, kind of pursuing art real seriously, my first instinct, because we live in a capitalist system, my first instinct was like, well, what's going to sell? How can I make portraits or draw comic characters that I know people will buy and things like that. But I really make it for myself, if I'm being honest. I think it's like the stuff that I'm making. I always joke that like all these dioramas is just an excuse for me to buy toys as an adult, and I think a lot of it is just me revisiting things, ideas that I had as a kid, or things I had questions about, or stories that I'd heard as a kid, whether it was like Hindu mythology, or it was some sci-fi movie that was on at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday that I just happened to catch, or Star Trek episodes or something like that. So I really started to kind of practice art as a form of, I guess, like comfort and care for that younger version of myself. To kind of to really encourage that younger version of me to explore and to keep questioning things and looking at life and the world from a different perspective.
Nice.
All
No,
right.
I think it's interesting that you say that because I remember being a younger artist, or just even like just out of high school and college, and I went to art school and thinking that they're kind of the same way that I want to make art to sell and make money. And then I kind of ran into different professors that they would often say, don't be so precious about your art and be so attached to criticism. So I
Mhm.
always have art that is I feel like, okay, this is just for me and I don't mind keeping it private. And then I have art that I'm not as attached to, that don't hold as precious. And so it ends up being, for sale and I don't have a problem letting it go.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to hear you say that because I think a lot of us, I don't know, for some reason we think that commercial art or selling art is really easy to do. But when you're really in tune and attached to it, a lot of the times I don't want to let it go, especially if I don't know the person. It's almost like my baby.
Right.
If I don't like you, I don't want you to buy my art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I do start, that's when I actually started making tie-dye. I was like, what can I do that's commercial that sells? And at some point you realize, oh, it's a little deeper than that.
And
And so
and I think. Oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
So one of the things for me was realizing that the things you can, and especially now in an era where you can just type in 10 words and have a machine generate art for you.
Right.
For me, the interest and the value in art was the actual creative process, and was whether that was me thinking back to ideas I'd had as a kid, or influences from my childhood, or it was I things that I wanted to kind of question and look into as an adult. That you mentioned kind of like selling stuff to people who you didn't really like, and to me, I always felt like those creations, the things that felt the most personal, one, they would give me an opportunity to talk about that stuff with other people, so it builds a
Mhm.
sort of community where I'm making weird alien art, and I can talk to people about what those aliens mean to me or what they mean to them, and kind of build a dialogue, even if it's somebody I don't necessarily see eye to eye on. We can have this moment of connection and communication,
Right.
and
No,
yeah,
I
that's.
think that's kind of how I fell into making more personal zines. And I always credit Lawrence Lindell because he's so open about his zines about mental health and wellness.
Yeah, Lawrence is
And his,
great.
yeah, and his personal stories. And so I think that sort of helped me in that area where now I'm having these discussions around my personal zines that I never thought that I would have. Like people spill their whole life story and whatever they're going through and just tell me everything. And that connection, that bond, and like you said, build a community is really amazing. Uh, but I don't necessarily, I don't know, I haven't found that sort of connection when it's a larger painting or illustration. It's usually something story based. And I think that it allows people access into me a little bit more. And that I really like. but it's
But
hard.
I,
I'm sorry, it's harder when
yeah.
it's something that people might need to interpret a little bit more when it's just
Mhm.
a series of images and there are no words or text. So I don't know. I haven't found that because my art that is just paintings or illustrations, sometimes I don't know, I wouldn't categorize it as weird, but it's definitely more coded and
Mhm.
harder to access if you may not share some of the same morals or cultural background. Like you
Mhm.
might not understand the little nuances, right?
Right, yeah.
But no, I've zine making has afforded me that opportunity to build those bridges, and so that's been amazing. Because I know you do zines and comics, and you feel like you get discussions out of those more so than your illustrations or paintings.
Yeah, I think I do. I will also say I think that speaks to the zine, the audience. You know, I think there's an incredible. To me, I'm always blown away whenever I do a marketing of call it a market and you know kind of talk with people about zines. People come to those events ready to talk, and they come with questions, and they come with their own. It feels like everyone is sort of coming in with a very open mind and coming in with a desire to connect with each other, which to me is such a great sign of community and a great sign of just the ability to kind of to connect as human beings.
Right.
And you know, I think we're both you know kind of I guess on the older side of the zine making world, but I
For
see
sure.
in the younger generations, to me, like a lot of the zines that they're making and the stories they're telling and the kind of ideas they're communicating are much more upfront. And I think about this in terms of I was talking with my kid the other day about the X-Men and kind of what it meant for us growing up, where everything was coded and it was sort of like you need to understand that this is a metaphor, an allegory for civil rights
Right.
or queer rights or you know
Yeah.
persecution of all kinds. And now it feels like all of those things are right on the face, you know. So you don't need to kind of hide any of that behind any sort of smoke and mirrors. It's just like
100%.
here's how I believe. You know, here are my politics. Here is my idea of the world, and it's very straightforward.
No, that's beautiful. It is because, like you said, in the 90s and even early 2000s, people were, I don't know if they were fearful or just more reserved because they didn't know how the audience would react.
Hmm.
So they did put in these coded messages to, so for us to translate, and we knew what they were talking about most
Right.
of the time. And so, yeah, that's an amazing factor when you talk about the zine community, even comic book community, where, okay, especially younger people are just very open and ready to talk about things that we thought were maybe taboo or, you should be a little bit, more careful about how you shared your ideas around them. And so that kind of segues into my next question. Is there something that, and I've asked everyone this so far, is there something that happened during the pandemic or during lockdown, something society implemented or you personally started doing that now that we're out of lockdown, that you think we should continue doing?
I mean, there are a lot of things. One was those checks. I feel like that having that having that steady income, you know, that was the first time I really ever got, you know, paid to make art because it was just, you know, collecting those unemployment deluxe checks and being able to kind of to have the freedom and the free time. You know, obviously there were a lot of things that were difficult about that time and the isolation. We're still kind of seeing the ripple effects of that, but I think the way that everybody I knew dove into whatever their passion was or the thing they'd been putting off for however long, all of a sudden it was like we all had time and we all had money,
Nice.
you know. And I think that was, or not all, you know, but a lot of us had the opportunities that we had either been denied or been denying ourselves for so long.
Right. Right.
And so
No,
I
that's
think that,
no, that's seeing these small businesses and these entrepreneurs come out of that time period is really, really cool. It's really cool. And especially people I did not expect. Oh, you have that talent? You have that skill? Nice.
yeah, or that passion. It was like, you know, even if you didn't have the talent going in, you learned something and you kind of grew in a certain way. You
Yeah,
know,
for
I
sure.
think about you know where we are now in terms of the job market and things like that, and There was that old, I think it was Jim Carrey had a speech, like a commencement speech, where he said, you know, you can fail at the things you hate too.
Yeah,
You know, and it's like if your job suddenly goes away, you know, you like what do you do then? Like when
yeah.
in 2020, when all of our jobs went away and you know we were kind of stuck, it's like do you keep looking for that or do you take that time to really you know improve yourself and dive into your own interests?
No, that's real because
Right, right.
you know, like at some point you have to jump into something that you really want to do so that you can get experience so that you can get, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and you know even if it's just that first little step, you know that's kind of what builds the momentum and shows people that you're serious about it
Yeah.
because you know, I tell people so many of my opportunities came because people saw me doing struggling at other stuff and you know like oh well he's not you know there yet but he's moving in that direction and so
Right.
I think that's always it's always going to be baby steps it's always going to be you know two steps forward one step back but you're still moving in that right direction and I think to me those early days of lockdown really you know that was one thing that we all sort of learned was that you can you know incrementally work towards your goal.
Right. No, and even I've done a lot of jobs for free so that I can learn. And
Yeah,
the paycheck was I learned the skill, you know.
right, yeah.
And
I will say the one caveat about that is that it's a thing that you chose to do. It's not someone said do
yeah,
this for free and I'll teach you how to whatever, or it's not you know do
right.
this for exposure and you'll get this opportunity.
Never fall for that exposure trick.
Never ever.
If there is one thing that you could say to your younger self, or something you could say to uplift younger artists, what or encourage younger artists, in yourself included as a younger artist, what would you say to them?
You know, I think it's what we've been saying, which is do it for yourself. You know, trying to do something because it makes money or trying to do something because someone else tells you it's what they want. Like that will always be there. You know, but doing it for yourself, creating something. There is no bigger satisfaction that I have than coming up with an idea on my own, learning how to kind of make it a real thing, and executing. I think that to me, it's like whether that sells or not at the end of the day, doesn't matter. You
Right.
know, it's like just that process teaches me something about myself. It fulfills me, it nourishes my spirit. And I think everybody should have that experience and everybody should pursue their own passions because a friend of mine told me, you know, it's if you don't chase your dreams, someone will pay you to chase theirs.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Another question I've asked other artists is if you could set up an art studio or have a dream location, make your art in a dream location, what would that look like? Where would it be?
You know, I think the two things for me, the biggest things are, you know, just kind of space, like having enough space to spread out a little bit, work on bigger projects, and community. You know, having a place. I had a studio over the last this past year that I was managing, and you know making it a place where people could just pull up, draw, read, chill, you know, like having a space because there's almost no third spaces where you can
Right.
just come, you don't have to pay money, you just show up, you talk to people, you have a couple conversations, you know, and you make your art or you watch other people make art or you learn about, you know, certain techniques and processes. And to me that kind of person to person connection or that community connection in the flesh is so crucial and it's
Yes.
you see it across every single culture. You know there are these spaces that are built for humans to get together and talk and share things and learn things. I mean, you know, that's why we have schools, it's why we have libraries, it's why we have public parks, because human beings, we have a fundamental need to gather, you know.
No, and I love that, like you said, organically. I remember back when I was younger, you would just, like you said, show up at somebody's house and you'd pull out your sketchbook and
Hmm.
just, yeah, this communal bonding of creativity. And that's
Right.
what really, you know, what it's all about. I mean, we're making it as a form, for me, as a form of a communication. And
Hmm.
so you can't always do that in a silo by yourself, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Someone has to be there to hear it, and you know, you got to be there to listen.
Right, for sure. Um, also, is there a big, or not necessarily big, something that you've discovered, or art supply, or new technique, or uh, you know, something recently that you figured out or found that you'd like to share with people?
Um, Technique and art supply. I mean, I since I started making those dioramas, I got really into magic sculpt, which I'm resting my feet on two big buckets of the gallon drums of magic sculpt. It's like a two-part epoxy clay. But I think honestly, it's really the thing that has really been at the front and center of my mind is just taking inspiration from everywhere.
Mm,
Understanding that every single thing you do, everything you look at, everything you experience, everything you touch, everything you talk about is a source of inspiration. It's a thing that's if it's not feeding you, it's planting a seed for something that'll sprout 5-10 years from now. I think about, like I said, all of the stuff that I draw from is stuff that I had as a child or I was exposed to as a child, and now
right.
it's bearing fruit.
No, that's amazing that you said that. I had a college professor tell me that, and I guess I was maybe 20, 21, and I did not understand what he was talking about. And
Uh-huh.
it's clicked over the past 10 years, like, oh, this is what he meant. Like everything that your life involves, that is part of your art making. Your
Right. Yeah.
personal life, that's art. Like whatever movie you go see, or you take a walk and you see a plant, like all of it. That's
And
all.
I especially out here, I've been going on. I live in North Oakland. I've been going on a lot of walks around the neighborhood and just seeing all of for somebody who makes sci-fi art, the plants of Northern California and the Bay especially, it's all alien to me. It's like there's such strange shapes and colors and all that stuff. So there's inspiration everywhere.
That's dope. No, we should go for a walk. And I used to live in Richmond. I grew up in Richmond, and
Mhm.
I recently went there and I forgot how gorgeous it is, like the shoreline and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we should definitely take a trip out there.
yeah.
And next question, what projects are you working on now, and what's coming up next?
So right now, let me see. I got so did put a skateboard or built a diorama on a skateboard for a show at 111 Minna. So it's like a huge skateboard show. There's I think 300 artists or something like that.
Wow.
And yeah, so the walls are packed with skateboards. Everybody kind of did their own thing. So I've got a second skateboard. I went to buy that one, and then Joanne Fabric was going out of business. So I was like, well, let me get the clearance skateboard too. So
Nice.
I'm working on one more of those. But then the other thing is, going back to that kind of childhood inspiration, I've been picking up a lot of old photo books and art books about kind of a classical Indian art and just photos of India. I haven't been back since what was it? It's been 15, 16 years now. But just really reconnecting with the images and the artwork from my childhood and kind of learning some of those styles of because each region has its own artistic practice and it's
Okay.
whether it's textiles or it's visual arts or it's ceramics and so just kind of looking into those and seeing how I can draw inspiration from those and incorporate that style into my practice. So I've got a series of larger pieces that are going to be drawing inspiration from some of the themes that I explore in my other artwork, but really doing it through the lens of classical Indian art and folk art.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you shout out if you have a website, Instagram, social media?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So social media, I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky at Young Coconut, and then I've got a website, youngcoconut.com, where you can find some of my other work, some of my writing work, and then it's got links to my shop and everything like that. So
Cool. And I'll put that in the description box below. Well, I really appreciate you spending time talking to me. This has been
yeah,
awesome. I learned quite a bit about you that I didn't know, which is always good.
yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I feel like we've known each other. I was thinking when you were talking about making your kind of personal artwork and all that stuff. The first time we really had a conversation, I bought an Octavia Butler portrait from you. I don't know if you remember this. It would have
What
been
year?
20, I want to say 2016 maybe. You were tabling with Brina at one point.
Okay.
I want to say, yeah, it was some market in North Oakland, like in that off of Telegraph at 55th. I think there's that little
Oh,
arcade
okay. Yeah, yeah,
space.
yeah.
So that was like the first time we actually had any kind of conversation, and it was super brief. I just came in and said, like your stuff, picked up a portrait, and went on my way. But yeah, no, it's good to kind of like have these more substantial conversations, get to know people better,
For
get to know
sure,
them
for
better. Yeah.
sure. No, I've always liked your work, and I think I do remember that because that was one of my Oakland creates.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it was.
and God, that's been a long time because we haven't been in that space for a long time. But I remember, was it Tana introduced me to you? I think,
Right, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, but then I spoke to you again. I think it was San Francisco Zine Fest years, a couple years after that. But I
Mhm.
mean, we always kind of see each other in passing because the East Bay is only so big, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
Oakland is not that big. I mean, it's big, but then you see the same artist all the time. So it's really good to sit down and talk to you
Mhm.
again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great. I can't wait to
For sure, for
check
sure.
out the other videos on this.
Nice.